Hey everybody, my name is Hayden and I'm one of the co-founders of Tesloop. And today I'm going to be talking about distinguishing what is reality versus what is fantasy when it comes to blockchain and mobility. And so in the 90s, networks emerged that helped move information around digitally. And so instead of books, record players, and cable boxes, we have Google, Spotify, and Netflix. And now connectable, electrified, and increasingly autonomous vehicles are coming to the market, and this represents a fundamental change in the fabrics of our automotive mobility. And so just like bits did in the 90s, new platforms are going to emerge to digitally move atoms in cars. And I believe that this is going to start with and represent the fundamental digitization of personal transportation. And so most new cars in 3 years will be connected, but the big questions are, what will they be connected to? What will the nature of those networks be? And what do we as society and consumers of transportation want? And so you hear a lot about this idea of Uber on the blockchain, but does that really make sense, or does it just create more problems than it solves? Do mobility consumers actually care about their network running on the blockchain? Well, we'll get into that, but first let's just dig into what's happening here. So what is a connected car, and what does that mean? Well, connected cars have continuous data streams that let you process and store all the car's data and let you monitor and control various attributes of the car in real time from anywhere in the world. And so what you can do with this is really fascinating. By just monitoring the data, you can help owners have healthier battery tendencies with their driving, be more efficient. If they're lending the car out to somebody and they're speeding, or maybe their kid is driving it and they don't have their seatbelt on, you can inform all of that to them over the air. But then once you start sharing this data with various partners in real time on an extensible data bus, you open up a whole new world of possibilities. So right now, when you're getting insurance, you fill out a long form and you send it to a bunch of different companies who then look at it and they're like, oh, you're an 18-year-old kid that lives in Calabasas and has a 4.2 GPA. You have this much risk on you, and they give you a quote that's really just based on averages and assumptions. But what if instead of that, you could just take your last few months of historical driving data and share that with the insurance companies anonymously, and then they could look at that and give you a better quote that really reflects your driving habits. And same with tires. Right now, when you buy a car, you have to check the tire pressure, you have to figure out when to rotate them, see how much tread depth there is and when you need new tires, and then take it into the shop and you want to get them repaired, and it's just a really big hassle. But what if instead of that, you could just share this data with a tire service provider who could then figure out when all of that needs to happen and then deploy mobile vans in your area to take care of this for you while you're working or while you're sleeping, and so you would never actually have to think about tires again. And then parking. I bet some of you maybe drove here and were aimlessly wandering around trying to look for parking, or you left your car in the airport and flew in, and maybe when you got there you took a ticket and you really don't want to lose that ticket because it's going to cost you $50. That's kind of stressful. So instead of that, you could just see in real time where all the parking lots are available and how much they cost, and then drive into it and share that data with the parking lot operator, and they could programmatically charge you based on how long you stayed there. And so that all sounds great, right? And it is, but it actually gets better, because once you can effortlessly share out your car with others when you're not using it, the economics of ownership get radically more favorable. And so, just like PCs when they first came out, before they were connected to AOL or to the internet, they were functionally just islands of themselves. They didn't have that much utility. And I think we're seeing a lot of similarities now with cars. And so it's reasonable to expect that in the near future, networks designed around connected cars will begin to emerge. And generally, when you have networks, they get dominant through network effects. So it's really important that we understand what kind of networks we want this happening to. And so do we want them to be centralized or decentralized, owned by Uber or owned by the government? Do you want the data within them visible to everybody or just to you? And that's the big question that we have to figure out. And at the end of the day, it's going to be the people that own cars that decide where this popularity goes to. And so we can look at some of what car owners care about and see how much blockchain really helps with that. And so, firstly, let's look at economics. Raise your hand here if you would pay 12 cents per year to have all your car's data logged, and you can retrieve it at any point, so it's kind of like a really granular Carfax. And yeah, for 12 cents, I hope you would all raise your hand. But then keep your hand up if you would pay $54,000 a year for that same privilege, but it was stored on a blockchain. And because the big problem is storage and compute on blockchains are about 1 million times more expensive right now than doing so on a centralized server. And so it's not a big win for economics. And then user experience-wise, I don't know if any of you are familiar with B token or Augur, but I contend that what they built over the last few years could have been done much quicker had it been done centralized. And layer on the fact that even interacting with these systems requires a pretty you need to be pretty proficient at technical interfaces. Most people, when they want to hail a car to them, they just want to click a button. They don't want to change this token for that token and figure out how much gas they want to pay for this transaction, which will make their driver come faster to them. That kind of goes above the head of most people in consumer apps. And then transparency, privacy, and innovation are all really important, but much of what they accomplish can actually just be achieved through open source software. And so there's not a whole lot of benefits there. But then we can even run through some of these blockchain buzzword bingo words and see if any of those will be helpful. So censorship resistance. Well, let's think about it. The government controls your ability to get a license to drive on roads that it controls. And so that doesn't seem too helpful. And then fraud resistance is important in the long term, but in the short term, it's not too critical. And then permissionless interoperability. Well, open source is really important because everybody in the network or in the industry will benefit if it's very low risk to sign up for the network. They have control of some of the policies, and they're in an environment of aligned interests. But there's no fundamental advantages of using blockchain for that right now. And then transparency and robustness, again, can be accomplished through open source and selective data sharing. So, all of those 5 don't really need a blockchain. And the one thing that you do need to be running on a blockchain for is to have an efficient global payment and incentive mechanism structure, i.e. tokenization, which does provide a framework for fair and low-cost distribution of value amongst the network. And so while all of those will be good to have in the future, they're not too important right now. And so what does the path to getting there actually look like? Well, here's what we think, and we actually released this on karmic.net earlier last week. So anybody with a Tesla can connect their car in a matter of minutes to a system that is designed around consumer privacy and safety, has open standards for data transferring and querying, and has a clear and transparent economic model. And there are some places for the blockchain within this. We can take hashes of small amounts of data and throw those onto a blockchain to provide the customer or the car owner with the veracity and immutability that blockchains provide. And then it'll be tokenized because we want to facilitate global, low-cost microtransactions and enable permissionless application development. But at the end of the day, we just really want individuals to own their share of the network, have a say in the governance, and be rewarded for their early adoption. And so in 3 years, anybody that owns a connected car should never have to think about their tires again. They should never be overpaying for insurance. They should be awarded and financially benefit from participating in the network. They should never have their data being collected or sold without their explicit permission and personal benefit. And they should be able to find a car in every city that suits their needs and maintains their privacy. And so the big picture here is that you can design all of this with a blockchain paradigm without actually using a blockchain for everything. And this is how you deliver the best user experience with the lowest costs and the highest token value in the fastest time frame. But in the long term, do we really want a centralized party controlling our car network? I don't think so. We want decentralized, open source software with clear governance. And while this may take 5 or 10 or 15 years, eventually the technical capabilities will support this network that we want as individuals. And it's also important to note that transportation is a pretty unique use case where what you actually need to run it across the world is pretty consistent. And so it has the ability to let a single market grow into the hundreds of billions of dollars of valuation. And so now it is more important than ever that we do everything in our power to guide the development of these networks in the right direction. And so I guess I'm not actually pitching an ICO. We're not selling anything. They brought me here last minute because somebody bailed out. But we have a great team to do this, and if anybody has any questions or has a Tesla they want to sign up, go to karmic.net. And there's no actual features yet. We're still working on the features. But the first thing is going to be the data services, and then we're working with insurance companies and Goodyear for tires and some parking providers to get all of that in place. It should be ready, for at least some pretty decent value-add services by end of next month. So thank you for showing up to all that came.